Hey, what's up guys? Today in this video we are going to take our storefront to the next level where we are able to add an address to our customer object. So before we start that, let's understand what we are trying to do. I'll go to GitHub, my profile, and if you go to that repository, click on the Vercel app, we are over here. Let me also quickly open up the admin. Okay, so I was already logged in and hence this came out easily. Now, what happens is if I also open up the GraphQL API, I'll show you a few things. For example, there is something called as active customer, and active customer has addresses. Okay, it can have multiple addresses, an array of address, and these addresses have multiple fields out of which the street line 1 and the country is something which is important. Okay, and then if we go down the route of an order, so I'll show you vendure order flow, something like this. I'm showing you these documents because it would help you understand the stuff. But okay, what happened? Just stopped. Okay, right. So if we go over here, this is manipulating the order, adding item to order, which we have already done. The remove item from order is done. And then if you see, there is something as set shipping address. Okay, this mutation is required so that the order is, an order gets an address where it needs to be shipped, right? There are two kinds of addresses. One is the customer shipping address and the second one is customer billing address, and they can be same for practical purposes. But what we are trying to do over here in this video is, let's just say if I log in quickly, let me just do that. Reach me.com. Okay, let me do that. And if I try to click on this, add to cart. So yes, this is my cart, right? Now, if I try to proceed to checkout, I'm given this option where I have this form. I can create an address for myself. And what will happen is, I'm not sure if I still have the login on the admin. Right, I do. So if you go to customers and then if I go over here, I don't have any address over here, right? Now the moment I fill it, so for example, home, somewhere in India, Mumbai. Something like this. If I fill it out, and if I come over here and refresh, I can see this address is populated, right? And I can see the address over here as well. If I add one more, for example, office, something like that, random. Oops. So 700001 IN. Right. And if I refresh now, can you see the second address is coming over here as well, and inside the customer object, right, we can see these two addresses. So this is something which I'm going to show you how I have done into the form and how the mutations and queries are running so that you get an understanding. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing that I have done in terms of refactoring is the card page was looking quite big, and hence I refactored it and took the table inside in its own component. So if I go to my pages, user, my cart, index.tsx, as you can see, I have a new component called cart table, where I am passing the active order, which needs to be shown, right? And active order has obviously the lines which it is getting rendered, and remove item from order, this function which is part of the function which removes, which calls the mutation, right? This remove function from the mutation, right? So I'm passing that function over here. Let's quickly look at the card table. I'll open it up. So I have props coming in here. I have active order, which is of type I active order or null, which was basically part of my card code, which was initially on the page. I had just moved everything basically into this component itself. I'm also getting this function, which is returning a void. So I'm destructuring the two things coming from the prop. And then inside a fragment, what I'm doing is this table is created, and then based on the active order, whether it is present, if it is not null, I am running a map function on the active order lines. And based on that, I'm getting this output. So nothing major, but just a quick hygiene check so that my card page doesn't grow too big, right? Because practically what I have done is this much code, this entire table is now just being rendered in 4 lines max, right? So that's something which you should be doing to keep your pages manageable. Now, the next thing that I have done is obviously a very simple thing. It's a button. I created a component out of it because I thought it would help me in multiple places. So I have this button, which is basically a component from Hyper UI. Those of you who don't know Hyper UI, it's a beautiful list of components which you can use built on Tailwind, and I personally find them very helpful. And the entire UI for this particular storefront is basically done using this UI library. Okay, so I took the button and I created this small little component where I'm expecting an href for the link component. And obviously the styling is right now hard-coded, fixed to a blue one, which I can change later. That's not the main intent right now. And I have the text which is coming for the button text, for example, proceed to checkout, right? So on my cart page, I am sending this text and the link where the button will take me. So these are the 2 refactoring that I have done. Now, if I go to the actual page, right, which is inside my page, set address.tsx, this is where the meat of all these things are happening. So I'm showing 2 addresses over here, which is part of the customer object, because you need to understand that the addresses belong to the customer, and when an order is placed, right, at that point, whatever address the customer is showing, that gets added to the order, because the order will continue to use that address as its final destination. You as a customer may change your address, but that doesn't mean that the order will also automatically start reflecting that new address. They can't do that because you may change it to something else, and then anything can go haywire. Okay, so we have the ability to, the functionality will be that I can select from any of the address, and if I don't have an address as of now, then I can add from here, or if I want to send it to some other address, I can add it and then I can send to that particular address. So how are these coming up? Well, let's go over here. As you can see, I am iterating through addresses. Okay, how is address coming up? Let's see. So on this page, I have a state variable address and set address. The address is using the useState hook. I'm saying that this particular thing is an array of addresses. The interface we have already created in our previous videos. And I'm initiating that array with an empty array. Then I am running a query, user address query, sorry. What it does is it queries the active customer and it takes all the addresses which are associated with that particular customer. Okay. Once we get that, obviously what we are doing is we are setting all the addresses into the state variable. And the reason I have kept that as a state variable is because in the next video, when I'm going to handle the submit of this form properly, what is going to happen is I will hit save. The mutation will run. It will save it to the customer object, and the same thing will be added to the state variable so that it is immediately visible on this list. Okay, so far we are fetching the list of addresses through this GraphQL query. Okay, because the data will change, we call the set address function from the hook, and these addresses are added. And then we are looping through it. Address card is a component which I have created, small little thing, basically just displaying the fields, right? So this is something which I have done, and that card is responsible to render that. And then we finally get this. Below that, we have this add address form. Obviously, because if some customer doesn't have any address, then they need to add it, right? So how do we do that? Let's go over here. This is my component, the form component. We have created quite a few components as of now, but let's quickly run through what is happening in this component. So obviously I'm using formic because so far in all our forms, we have been using that library. iValues is basically the values which are present in that form. I have created an interface for that so that working with that data becomes a bit easier for me in this component. So add address is our component, add address form rather. We have one mutation over here. If we quickly look at that, it's add address to customer mutation. This mutation takes all these fields. Out of that, ideally, based on what vendure says, they are only interested in customer code and street line 1. But what I have done is I've said, okay, we will capture everything as of now. Okay, it just makes the UI look a little better. That's the only reason I took that shortcut. Okay, create customer address, all the variables which are coming from this mutation, right? That goes into the input, and I'm not returning too many things as of now because I understand that the object will be with me, and so I can add it to the state pretty easily. Right. So this mutation will be as configured. I'm taking the function add address. Okay. Now the initial form values is basically a constant which is using the iValues that I have declared over here, this interface, right? I'm saying that this is the type of initial values that the form will have. Why? Because if you know how formic works, let me close this handle submit for now. The formic takes initial values as a prop and on submit function as a prop. So I'm saying initial values is a variable called initial values, which is of type iValues, and iValues is defined over here where the shape of that particular thing is declared. Things become quite easy then. And then there is this typical stuff, which is we have a form tag, and then we have div where the label and the form elements are all there, which basically results in this long form. Okay, I'm not focusing right now too much on the beautification of this form, but basically this does work, and that's how we saw that we added this, right? So everything is working over here. On submit, this handle submit function is called. We get the values, we get set submitting, which we set it to false so that we don't have repeating submits, right? That should be stopped. Okay, I should have used the reset form as well. Let me do that. I have this, right? So I'll call this function that will help me. Okay, and whatever are the values, right? What I have done is I have destructured everything. It's full name, street line 1, 2, city, province, postal code, blah, blah, blah. All those constants are added over here. I took that shortcut because otherwise I would have to do something like this. Okay, if I have the same variables, right, the destructuring becomes very easy, and this kind of syntax again becomes easy. So all these variables, add address, right, it goes to this mutation as these dollar full name, dollar street 1, street 2. So like that. I mean, we have already done such forms like the login form, the registration, right? So this shouldn't be new to you, but if you haven't seen those videos, then I would suggest you go to the registration form video and go through that to understand in details how this works. But in nutshell, the values from this form, right, are passed over here, and this mutation is called. Because of this mutation, right, we add that add that shipping address to the customer object. So yeah, pretty straightforward stuff. With that in place, now when this form is submitted, the mutation is called, and the customer object gets that particular address. So yeah, that's about it, guys. That's how we are now able to add customer address through this form, and the customer will be able to select the address where he wants to ship the order that he is creating right now. So thanks for watching, guys. If you like this video, do click on the thumbs up icon. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and if you have any questions, feel free to comment below and I'll try to reach out to you as soon as possible.